In today's video, I'm going to be completing Pokémon Scarlet with just Iono's team. You might think only having electric types is going to be a bit of a problem, and you'd be completely right. Luckily though, Iono has a Miss Magius, meaning we can get a Ghost type as well. She also has decent type coverage when it comes to moves, Bellybolt getting access to water type moves, and Kilowattrel having fly type moves. There's quite a few different types we can get throughout the course of the game. Transferred all 5 of her team members over from Pokemon Home. And yeah, you heard that right, we only get 5 team members in this entire challenge. If we went with her original team, we'd only actually have 3, but I'm using her rematch team, so we get 5 different team members. I've got them all here in the PC, and I'm going to start with Shinx, getting a new team member after every gym. I won't be using any items in battle, and that includes held items. I'm also not going to be allowed to terrestrialize. The level cap's not going to be as strict as a Nuzlocke, but I am going to try and keep it close for most of the game. Made light work of Nomura early on, and straight after that, Shinx evolved into a Luxio. This is going to be really useful up against the Bug-type gym, but before we do that, I have a little plan. There's a very specific move that's going to make the next gym, and the gym after that, pretty easy. So I head back to the cave where we found Koraidon, and I take out a few Houndours. This is going to give me the Houndour Fang, meaning I can take it back to the TM creator and create Fire Fang. It's not the strongest Fire-type move, but at this point, it's going to come in really handy. We easily take out Nimble, and her second teammate, Tarantula, is going to meet the exact same fate. The only one that's going to cause us some issues is her Teddiursa. She's going to terrestrialize it and start using Fury Cutter, which gets stronger every time she uses it. I'm really hoping we can take this thing out in 2 hits, so I go for a Fire Fang. We managed to get it below half, meaning one more Fire Fang is going to be enough, and as she hits her first Fury Cutter, it takes us all the way down to the red. One more Fury Cutter would have been more than enough to take Luxio out, so we're actually really lucky that we hit that second one. With Teddiursa taken out, Katie's defeated, and we've beaten the first gym. That also means we can get a new team member, and I'm taking Wattrel next. Flying type could be really useful against the grass type gym, and I also just think Kilowattrel is an excellent Pokemon. As we take down the Rock Titan with ease, I've got a favour to ask. If you're not subscribed to the channel, I'd really appreciate clicking that button. These videos take me a long time to make, and by clicking like or subscribe, it makes a really big difference to me. So thank you if you've done that. After taking down the Rock Titan, we head over to the Grass Gym. Grass usually wouldn't be a great matchup for Electric, but luckily we've got Luxio with Fire Fang and Wattrel with Pluck. These are 2 super effective moves that are going to be really handy here. We actually got really unlucky trying to take down the Petilil, with Luxio getting put to sleep and missing his attacks. But finally, we hit a Fire Fang and took it out. Luxio really shouldn't have taken that much damage against this Petilil. But at least with that out the way, we can take down the Smoliv with ease. One Fire Fang knocks it out, and it's time for his ace, Sudowoodo. He's going to terrestrialize it into a grass type, which actually works in our favour. And on top of that, we even got the flinch twice, and got the burn off. This means our third Fire Fang takes out Sudowoodo without it even being able to attack once. That was crazy lucky, but to be honest, we still had Wattrel in the back who had a super effective Pluck, so I wasn't too worried anyway. On top of that, we get the Trailblaze move, which is going to be really handy coming in later. With our second gym badge, I get a new team member in Mischievous, and we head over to the Sky Titan. Obviously, Flying type's going to be taken down by electric moves really easily, and this one was no problem at all. Next up was the first Team Starbase, and on the way, we ran into a shiny Swablu. This is going to be really handy. If you don't know, I'm collecting shinies for an entire run with 6 shiny Pokemon, and this is number 4. I must have lost to Giacomo about 10 times, and I decided to train up. I evolved Wattrel into Kilowattrel, and I also evolved Luxio into Luxray. I had to overlevel a little bit in order to take down this Starbase. The encounter levels start to scale pretty quickly after this. Spawniard went down to a Fire Fang, and as he went for a Snarl doing not too much damage to Luxray, he did drop our special attack. This doesn't matter too much since Fire Fang's a physical move anyway, and he goes for another Snarl next turn, dropping our special attack again. We finally managed to get him down to the orange as Luxray gets defeated. I send in Kilowattrel next, and we start going for Thundershock. He decided to use Metal Sound, but luckily it missed. Thundershock did a decent amount of damage, and 2 more should be enough to take him down. He actually connected his next Metal Sound, and all it did was lower our special defense. All we need to do is survive the next attack, and Thundershock will take him down. He hits his Snarl, and it doesn't even do half. It does lower our special attack, but his health's low enough now that we still take him out anyway. Giacomo was pretty tough, and it just goes to show how strong these star bases can really be. Next up is the fake Iono, and we're pretty over leveled now, so this shouldn't be too much of an issue. She starts with her Wattrel, and we start with Luxray. Firefang takes the Wattrel out in one hit, and she's down to just 3 Pokemon now. Take out her Luxio with Trailblaze to make sure our speed's high enough to take on the Miss Magius. Next up is her Belly Bolt, and a critical hit from Bite takes that down too, leaving her with just her Miss Magius. I could go for Bite here, which would be super effective, but she terrestrializes it into an electric type, so I'm going to have to use something else instead. I went for Firefang to try and get the burn off, and we managed to get a flinch first turn. We hit the Firefang second turn, and she goes for a Confuse Ray, which could be really annoying. We actually break through the confusion next turn, and we hit a Firefang. This means we beat Iono using just 1 Pokemon. Granted, it was pretty overleveled, but that's still a good achievement. This also means we get a new team member, and I'm actually looking forward to this one. We get Voltorb. I've never used Voltorb or Electrode before, and I know its signature move is Self-Destruct and Explosion. This could actually be quite fun considering I'm not doing a Nuzlocke, and I've never actually really used these moves before. I decided to go for it first turn against the Torkoal, and yeah, that was probably not a great idea. I sent in Miss Magius next, and we took the Torkoal down to the red as it goes for a Flame Wheel, nearly knocking Miss Magius out. Another Hex knocks the Torkoal out. Mela's only got her Starmobile left, but with a Blazing Torque she manages to take Mischievous out before we can do any damage. I decided to send Luxray in, and as it started going for overheats, it started dropping its own stats. This is going to come in really handy as Spark's doing a decent amount of damage. We finally get to the point where one Spark finishes off the Starmobile with a burnt Luxray with only 2 HP. He actually would have been knocked out by the burn this turn, so it was really good that we knocked out Mela at this point. We still had team members in the back, but I think Luxray deserved that win. We went over to the Steel Titan next, which was an absolute breeze considering we had Firefang. Mischievous finished it off, and we head over to the Water Gym next. Bofu's the only thing standing between our last team member, and it's going to come in really handy having a Tadbulb. Once we evolve it into a Belly Bolt, we can learn Water type moves for some much needed coverage. On top of that, Kofu uses Water types, which go down really easily to electric moves. Get him down to his last Pokemon, a Crabominable, and he makes it weak to basically my entire team by terrestrializing it into a Water type. What a genius. Kilowattrel goes for an Electro Ball and does serious damage. That was well over half, as a Crab Hammer takes Kilowattrel down. Pretty much anything I send in now is going to finish off Crabominable, so I send in Voltorb and start going for Charge Beams. We finally knock this thing out, and we can get our final team member. This means we've got 4 gyms, 2 star bases, and 2 titans, and we're doing pretty well so far. I evolved my Tadbulb straight away using a Thunderstone, and I also take a minute to go off the beaten path. I'm going to head over to the Ghost Gym, but not to fight it just yet. I'm going to grab a Dusk Stone from behind. I can use this to evolve Mischievous into Miss Magius, and that is going to be a much needed power boost. This is our only non-electric type Pokemon, and we're really going to need it to be as strong as possible. I decided to get my team fully evolved by training up my Voltorb and evolving it into Electrode at level 30. This now means we have every Pokemon we can have on our team, and they're all fully evolved. We head over to the normal type gym to take on Larry next. We're no longer over leveled, and as he sends Kamala in, this thing could be a bit dangerous. It uses Yawn, and since I can't use items in battle, when my Pokemon fall asleep, I just have to keep using moves until they wake up. Unfortunately, this means Kilowattrel gets knocked out. I send in Electrode and start going for Charge Beams. His Slam's actually really powerful, and as he gets a critical hit, knocking Electrode down to 6 HP, he falls asleep. He finishes off Electrode with a Sucker Punch, and I honestly don't know how this little koala has taken out 2 of my team members already. We send in Belly Bolt and finish it off, and as he sends in the Dunsparce, I switch to Luxray. The plan here was to use Trailblaze and bring our speed up, but unfortunately, it was just a bit too strong. We took a bit of a risk going for a Hyper Beam with Miss Magius, but when we took it out, we were able to switch out without having to recharge next turn. His final Pokemon's a Staraptor, and this would be really easy to take out with our electric type moves, but he terrestrializes it into a normal type. Finally a gym leader that actually uses terrestrialization to their favour. The plan here is to just keep going for Sparks, even though it's not doing a whole lot, to try and get the paralysis off. That's exactly what happens just in time for the Staraptor to knock Belly Bolt out, and I switch back to Luxray. Volt Switch doesn't do a whole lot, but it means I can switch to Mismagius in order to predict the normal type move that he's going to use next. This doesn't affect Mismagius and lets us get a free attack in. We get paralysed the next turn, and Staraptor gets paralysed as well. Mismagius then gets paralysed for a second time in a row, and the Staraptor breaks through with an Aerial Ace. We try and go for Hyper Beam again, but for a third time in a row, Mismagius gets paralysed. On top of that, Staraptor gets paralysed for the second time in a row. It hits its next Aerial Ace, and we get a fourth paralysis. I honestly don't know what the likelihood of that happening is, but that's honestly crazy. Luckily, the same thing's happening to Staraptor as it gets a third paralysis as well. It hits another Aerial Ace, and we get a fifth paralysis. We did get one move in between, but that is honestly crazy. 5 out of 6 moves paralysed is crazy. We managed to hit our Hyper Beam finally and knock the Staraptor out, defeating Larry and getting us our 5th gym badge. We do have a full team now, so we don't get a new team member, but Nomorov challenges us to a battle straight after. She's an absolute cakewalk as we finish off Quaquaval with a Spark. Made sure to use the Pokemon Center when I went over to the Ghost Gym to get the Dusk Stone earlier, so we fly over there and challenge Ryme to a battle. This will be our 6th gym badge, and it's double battle. She's sending in Mimikyu, which I know for a fact uses Disguise, so I take this opportunity to use Discharge with Electrode. It's going to hit Kilowattrel, but it won't do too much. It'll also break Mimikyu's Disguise and take the Banette down to low enough health that an Electro Ball from Kilowattrel will knock it out. I think it's worth the trade-off there, since Kilowattrel doesn't take too much damage, and it puts us in a good position. She sends in her Houndstone next, and I decided to set up a light screen so that it will do less damage to us. Kilowattrel hits an Electro Ball, and Mimikyu hits a Slash, knocking Kilowattrel down into the orange. I knew Houndstone was going to use Phantom Force, since I remember from the last time I fought Ryme. I go for 2 Electro Balls on Mimikyu, and I was really hoping that would knock it out, but it survives with a Slither. The Houndstone then uses Phantom Force and knocks out Electrode, but Static makes sure that it gets paralysed first. Kilowattrel then hits an Electro Ball, finishing off the Houndstone before it can use Phantom Force again. It's kind of annoying that Mimikyu's still alive at this point, as it goes for a Slash, taking Kilowattrel down even more. Luxray finishes it off with a Bite, and it's time for her final Pokemon, Toxtricity. On top of that, she's going to Terrastallize it into a Ghost type, but luckily, with Luxray's Bite, we've got a super effective move. Electro Ball also does a decent amount of damage, since it's not an electric type anymore. We take it down to a red, and with a Hyper Voice critical hit, it knocks out Kilowattrel. We've still got plenty of team members, and a final Bite from Luxray knocks it out. This is our 6th gym badge, and one step closer to the Elite Four. Next up's going to be the Ground Titan, and this one's going to be pretty easy, even though we've got electric type Pokemon. We've got Water Pulse with Belly Bolt, and we also have Trailblaze with Luxray, even though we didn't need to use it. I really think these Titans could have been a lot more difficult, and they're just way too easy, so I skip over them. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you watching the video, and leaving a like will help me out a lot. Tulip's up next, and she starts with her Farragarith. I start with Mismagius, and start going for Foul Play. Foul Play is going to come in really handy here, being a Dark type move. It's pretty much our only answer to her whole team, apart from Luxray's Bite. She starts going for Crunch, which is going to be super effective against Mismagius as well. Luckily, we're able to take it out next turn before it can do any more damage. I send in Electrode next and go for a Light Screen against her Espathra. It goes for a Psychic, but since Light Screen's up, it doesn't do too much. I then start going for Discharge, but unfortunately, it doesn't quite do half. She goes for another Psychic, and it's not really doing that much. The Reflect wears off, but Discharge is a special move anyway, and still doesn't knock it out. We go for another Discharge next turn, and finally beat the Espathra, but Electrode's looking pretty low now. I decide to go for Explosion against the Gardevoir to get some damage off, since Electrode's so low on health anyway, and we take it below half. That's huge, since Gardevoir's got a crazy special attack stat. It obviously misses its Psychic, and Light Screen wears off. I decided to send Mismagius in next to try and finish it off in one hit. We go for a Foul Play, and it's not quite enough. I was sure Mismagius would go down to a Psychic, but somehow she survived with 3 HP. She goes for a foul play next turn and gets an unnecessary critical hit, but I'll take it anyway. That's Gardevoir down, and she's on to her final Pokemon, Floggeress. In its fairy type state, it would be really dangerous for my team, but now that it's been terastallized into a psychic, it's not quite as bad. Unfortunately, Mismagius misses and gets taken down by a Moonblast. Luxray still has full health and bite, so I send him in. He gets knocked down to nearly half, but with a second bite, he finishes off the Floggeress, and that's our 7th gym badge, and Tulip defeated. I actually completely forgot about Atticus, so I had to go back and beat him quick, but we were so overleveled that there's no point in even showing it. Next up was the Ice Gym, and this is going to be the final one before the Elite Four. She starts with her Frostmoth, and we start with Kilowattrel, going for a Volt Switch straight away. My plan is to just keep switching team members here, since I've got so many of them with Volt Switch anyway, and it'll keep her guessing. I sent Bellibolt in next as she sets up a Tailwind. She then tries to use a Blizzard, but misses, and Bellibolt goes for a Volt Switch of his own. One more Volt Switch should probably be enough to take it down, so I decided to send in my Luxray. She then hits her next Blizzard, taking him below half health, but a final Volt Switch isn't enough. I honestly thought that was going to finish it. I send in Bellibolt and go for another Volt Switch. This does finish it off finally, but it does mean that we've taken more damage than we needed to. I send Mismagius in against his Beartic, and with a Psychic, we lower its special defense. It then hits an Icicle Crash, doing huge damage, and the team's actually taken a bit too much here. I went for a risky Hyper Beam, and it paid off, taking the Beartic down. This means we can switch and don't have to recharge next turn. As Electrode comes in against the Titan, he doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but his static does activate, getting the paralysis off. I decide to go for an Explosion next turn since he's low on health, and it really didn't do quite as much as I was hoping. That's kind of annoying, but it does mean that it's in a position where Hyper Beam will finish it off. This means once again Mismagius can be switched out and doesn't need to recharge. Her final Pokemon is an Altaria, and she's going to Terastallize it into an Ice type. This is actually kind of good, since I can send in Luxray and start using Fire Fangs. It takes Luxray really low, but a Fire Fang nearly takes half of its health. It manages to hit its Hurricane next, doing huge damage and knocking Luxray out. I decided to send in Bellibolt next, so Altaria goes for an Ice Beam. It really didn't do a whole lot, and he actually managed to get the confusion off with a Water Pulse. It hit itself in confusion, and one more Water Pulse takes it down to just a sliver. We hit Water Pulse again, and the Altaria breaks through its confusion next turn, hitting another Ice Beam. Luckily for us, it's not going to be enough to take Bellibolt out, and with our final Water Pulse, we knock out the Altaria and get the Ice Gym badge. This now means we can head over to the Elite Four. We still got one Titan to take down and 2 Star bases, including the fight with Eri, which is quite possibly the most difficult fight in the whole game. Ortega takes us down to our last Pokemon, but luckily it's Mismagius, and he misses his Confuse Ray, meaning that one more Psychic knocks out his Starmobile. That means we've taken down 4 Star bases, and it's time for Eri. Before that, I'm going to head over and do the last Titan, which is the False Dragon Titan, Tatsugiri. We easily take it down with Mismagius' new move, Dazzling Gleam. This move's going to come in really handy against the Dragon type Elite Four member later, so I taught it to Mismagius now. I feel like the Dragon Titan would have been so much cooler if they used Baxcalibur at the top of the Ice Mountain, but I guess this Tatsugiri will have to do. On my way to Eri, I run into another shiny, and it's going to be a Shinx this time. What are the odds that it would be a member of our team? I'm not actually going to use this one for this challenge, since I want to save all my shinies for future runs. It is level 51, so it might not be that useful, but I'm going to keep it in the PC anyway. We head over to Eri, and it's time to take her on. I really wanted to take her out first turn, since I've never actually beaten Eri on my first try, but unfortunately, this was our second attempt. She starts with her Toxicroak, and I start with Mismagius and go for Psychics. She does have Sucker Punch, and it does more than half our health, as a Psychic knocks the Toxicroak out in one hit. That was really lucky, since another Sucker Punch would have knocked Mismagius out. Up against Lucario, I switch out to Luxray, since we can go for Fire Fangs. We get the burn off, not that we need it, and we finish her off with a Fire Fang. Next up is Persimmon, so I keep Luxray in since he's low on health anyway. We do a little bit of damage with a Fire Fang, and after using close combat, his defences are lowered. I send Miss Magius back in and go for a Psychic to knock the Persimmon out. Next up is Annihilate, and I start going for Discharge to try and do some damage. It hits Electrode to low health, but using Close Combat lowers its defences as well. I have no idea why I thought it would be a good idea to use Explosion here. It doesn't affect the Annihilate and knocks Electrode out. That was completely pointless. I send Belly Bolt in next and start going for Sucker Punch, which I thought would do way more damage than it did. The Annihilate easily takes down Belly Bolt, and I'm forced to send Miss Magius back in and go for a Psychic. Luckily, Annihilate was low enough that we were able to take it out next turn, and as the Starmobile comes in, I just start clicking Psychic and hoping for the best. For some reason, she went for a Shift Gear first turn, which means we can get another Psychic off. She then went for another Shift Gear next turn. I don't know what she's thinking here, but I'll take it. A second Psychic takes her down to about a third, and as she goes for a spin out, it knocks Miss Magius down. That's really annoying. One more Psychic might have been enough to finish this off. I send in Kilowattrel next, and she just goes for Shift Gear again. I'm getting a lot of free attacks against this thing, and as we finally hit a Hurricane for super effective damage, we actually managed to take out this Reverum. That's Eri defeated, and probably the hardest fight in the entire challenge. We head over to Arven next. Since we've beaten all the Titans, he wants to go for a battle. He sends in his Greedent first, and we start with Electrode. I'm going to go for a Discharge to try and get the paralysis off, but unfortunately, an Earthquake just proves too much. We send in Belly Bolt next to finish off the Greedent, and send in Miss Magius against this Scovillain. That proved to be a mistake since I didn't realise it had Crunch, and it finishes off Miss Magius. We then send Belly Bolt in. Not only does he take out the Scovillain, but he takes out Garganical as well. I then send in Kilowattrel, who finishes off Toadscruel with a Hurricane, and finishes off Cloyster with a Discharge. This means all he's got left is his Terrastalized Mabostiff. This thing's kind of dangerous, but I'm not too worried since we've got so many team members left. We go for a Discharge to try and get the paralysis off, and we actually manage to get it. He finishes off Kilowattrel with a Psychic Fang, and we send back in Belly Bolt, who falls to a Play Rough. This means we've only got one team member left, but it is Luxray, and he's super powerful. We manage to avoid a Crunch, and we go for a Fire Fang next turn, finishing it off. That's Arven defeated, and the Titan storyline complete. I'm going to finish off the Team Star storyline next, so I head back to the academy, where I'm met by Professor Cavil. He starts with his Oranguru, and we take it down with Electrode and Discharge. I was forced to switch to Kilowattrel since Electrode was put to sleep, and he sent in his Gyarados, which got taken down by one Discharge. His Abominable Snow is up next, and we actually managed to hit our Hurricane, taking it down. On top of that, he sends in his Poltergeist, and Kilowattrel knocks that out as well. His Among Us goes down to another Hurricane, and somehow his Terrastalized Skeledirge gets taken out by Kilowattrel as well. That's crazy. Kilowattrel was the absolute MVP of that match. After that, it was time to fight Penny. She leads with her Umbreon. We're going to go for Electro Ball here and see how much damage it does. Didn't really do enough, so I'm going to switch to Discharge. Before that, I started using Roost to try and get her health back up, since she's not really doing half our damage anyway. We managed to get a Discharge off and Paralyze, and after a few more Roosts, we take out the Umbreon and get back up to full health. We have no PP left for Roost, and as she sends in her Vaporeon, we go for an Electro Ball. She misses a Hydro Pump, and one more Electro Ball knocks the Vaporeon out. Kilowattrel's going to stay in since he's on fire at the moment. Quite literally, as Flareon goes for a Flare Blitz, gets hit with super bad recoil, and another Electro Ball's enough to take out Flareon. Kilowattrel's on really low health now, but I keep him in against Jolteon, and we go for a Hurricane, doing pretty decent damage, and getting the confusion off. Jolteon breaks through the confusion and goes for a Thunder. Luckily, it misses, and we get another turn to go for another Hurricane. I guess I was getting a bit greedy here, as we miss our Hurricane. It then snaps out of confusion, and actually hits its Thunder this time, taking out Kilowattrel. That's okay though, Kilowattrel's done so much damage at the moment. I send in Belly Bolt and start going for Mud Slaps. It's not doing a whole lot of damage, but it is getting the accuracy drops. And with this Jolteon using Thunder, which is an inaccurate move anyway, we managed to finally take it out. I switch to Luxray to take down Leafeon with Fire Fang, and as she terrestrializes her Sylveon, we go for Fire Fangs to try and get the burn. We don't get it first turn, and she hits Luxray with a Moonblast, finishing him off. That's kind of annoying, but we send in Mismagius next. We manage to outspeed and do a little bit of damage, but a Moonblast takes out Mismagius. We send in Electrode next and go for a Discharge. Doesn't really do a whole lot of damage, but it does get the paralysis off. I decided to go for Explosion since this is her last Pokemon and we still have one in the back. Explosion hits, finishes off the Sylveon, finishes off Electrode, that means that we win the battle. That was quite a fun way to finish this fight, and I'm actually really enjoying using this self-destruct move. I'm not saying I'll use it all the time, but it's actually quite fun when you're not doing a Nuzlocke. It's time for the Elite Four now, and first up is Ryme. She sends in her Wish Cache, and we send in Electrode. I'm going to set up a light screen here, which to be honest probably isn't the best move against the ground type, since they mostly use physical moves anyway. She gets off an Earthquake, and we go for an Explosion, taking out Electrode and taking the Wish Cache down to half health. This means Luxray can come in, finishing it off with a Trailblaze and boosting our speed by 1 point. This means we can outspeed the Donphan. I'm not sure if we would have anyway, but we go for a Trailblaze next turn. It doesn't do anywhere near as much as I was hoping, and an Earthquake does huge damage. I'm forced to just go for Trailblaze again, and we take it down to the red. It hits another Earthquake, and that knocks Luxray out. That kinda sucks since I was really relying on Trailblaze. I send Bellibolt in and go for a Water Pulse. This takes down Donphan, and in comes Dugtrio. It starts a Sandstorm. One Water Pulse is more than enough to knock it out. We actually got a critical hit here, which I'm not sure if we needed, but I'll happily take it. Camerupt also falls to one Water Pulse, and she's down to her last Pokemon now, Clodsire. She's going to Terrastalise it into a pure ground type, and I'm not actually sure what its original typing was. I started using Mud Slap here, which I knew wasn't going to do a whole lot of damage, but if I can get this thing's accuracy down early, then it means the rest of my team can quite easily finish it off. I just keep going for Mud Slaps, as it finally hits an Earthquake, taking me down to the red. A third Mud Slap gets a crit, knocks her Clodsire down to -3 accuracy, as she hits another Earthquake, finishing off Bellibolt. I would have rather get a couple more Mud Slaps, but I'll take 3. I know Mismagius is probably going to be my best bet here, so I send Kilowattrel in first. I go for a Hurricane, and it actually does decent damage. We then hit our second Hurricane in a row, take it all the way down to red health. We're forced to go for another Hurricane, since I don't think electric moves affect the Clodsire, but we actually managed to hit a third one in a row. This means we take out the Clodsire without even needing to use Mismagius, and that's the end of Ryme. Next up is Poppy and her Steel types, and she's going to be kind of difficult as well, since Electric isn't really great against Steel. I led with Electrode again, and set up another light screen. I didn't realise that her Copperajah was going to have a super effective move in high horsepower, and it did quite a lot of damage to Electrode. I was forced to go for Explosion, knowing full well it wasn't going to do too much damage. There's not really anything else Electrode could do there. I switch into Bellibolt and start going for Water Pulse to try and get the confusion off. Annoyingly, she set up Stealth Rock, meaning that every single team member I send in from here on out is going to get damaged. We finally get the confusion when Copperajah only has a sliver left, and if it hits itself, it'll knock itself out. Unfortunately, it didn't, and it hits a super effective high horsepower, doing huge damage. We take it out next turn, and as she sends in Bronzorg, I start going for Sucker Punch. It is super effective, but it didn't do too much damage. I sent in Kilowattrel next, and went for Electro Ball, since I thought Bronzorg would be really slow. It was, and we knock it out. The Magnezone sets up a light screen against Mismagius, and Dark Pulse does barely any damage. It starts going for Discharge, but it doesn't get the paralysis off. There's not a whole lot I could do here, so I kept going for Dark Pulse. Luckily, we got a really powerful critical hit, taking it down to the red, meaning one more Dark Pulse was enough to finish it off. She sends in her Corviknight next, and I went for Dazzling Gleam. I'm not sure why, I think I remember thinking it would be super effective, but it obviously wasn't. I then sent Kilowattrel in and took it out with a Discharge, which was super effective. This finished it off in one hit, and left only her Tinkaton next. She's going to Terrastalise it into a pure Steel type, so I sent in Luxray so I could go for Fire Fang. This was my secret weapon, and we took her below half health. On top of that, even with Gigaton Hammer, she could barely do any damage to Luxray. We need another Fire Fang to finish it off, and that's Poppy defeated. To be honest, these were the two Elite Four members that I was most worried about, since next up is Larry and his flying types. This should be an absolute breeze. Even his first Pokemon, Tropius, goes down to Fire Fangs. The rest of his team's going to go down to electric type moves as we take out Staraptor with one discharge. We then take out Altaria with two Electro Balls, and we manage to take out Oricorio with a Water Pulse. This just leaves his last Pokemon, Flamigo, and he makes it even weaker by terastallizing it into a flying type. Electrode takes it down with a discharge, and that's Larry defeated. This was even easier than his gym battle. Next up is the Dragon type Hassel, and we taught Mismagius Dazzling Gleam for this exact fight. First up he sends in his Noivern, which is part flying type, so I start with Electrode. I couldn't do a whole lot of damage with a discharge, and I was forced to use Explosion again. Somehow it survived with a Slither, and I sent Kilowattrel in since he's my fastest team member. We finished it off with a discharge, and he sends in Haxorus next. This thing has Rock Throw, and it manages to take Kilowattrel out with ease. On top of that, he knocks out Belly Bolt as well. I did manage to get its health quite low and paralyse it, meaning Mismagius could take it out with a Dazzling Gleam. Dragalge's up next, and it meets the exact same fate. Unfortunately, Mismagius falls to Flapple's Dragon Rush, and I'm left with just Luxray. This is our final team member, so we're going to have to take out Flapple and finish off his Baxcalibur. We outspeed with a Crunch, it gets a critical hit which we definitely didn't need, and we knock the Flapple out. His final Pokemon is a Baxcalibur, which would be quite easy to take down with Fire Fang, but he terastallizes it into a Dragon type. This means we're forced to use different moves, and I go for a Crunch, doing barely any damage. On top of that, he goes for a Glaive Rush next turn, and this does huge damage, taking us all the way down to the red. This is not looking good. I decided to go for a Fire Fang to see if it would do more damage and maybe get burn off, and we managed to take it down to half health. It hits an Icicle Crash and knocks Luxray out. That's really annoying, but I make my way back through the Elite Four again, and we end up in the exact same position. It's Luxray against Baxcalibur, but this time it's paralysed. The first Crunch takes it down to the red, and it hits its Glaive Rush, which we know from last time isn't going to knock Luxray out. It doesn't even do half this time, and our next Crunch is enough to knock the Baxcalibur out. Kind of annoying that we had to go through the whole Elite Four again, but at least we've gained a few levels in time for the champion. Speaking of which, Greta's up next. She sends in her Espathra and sets up a Reflect, right before we use a physical move in Crunch. Luckily it still does half, meaning we can use one more Crunch next turn to take the Espathra out. She does a little bit of damage and lowers our special defense before that, but we do manage to take it down. I decided to switch to Mismagius. This negates the special defense drops on Luxray and means that I can send Mismagius in against Avalugg. A Psychic does more than half as he retaliates with a strong Crunch. We hit another Psychic next turn, taking out the Avalugg, and we send Luxray back in. Fire Fang does huge damage to the King Gambit, but unfortunately he gets a crit and knocks Luxray out. I send Kilowattrel in next and finish the King Gambit off. Next up is Veluza, who goes down to a super effective discharge, and after that she sends in her Go-Goat. We go for a Hurricane and miss, but it just wastes a turn going for Bulk Up. The reason I say it's a waste of a turn is we hit our Hurricane next move and get a one-hit KO. This is a great start. She's down to her last Pokemon, Glimora, and she terastallizes it into a pure Rock type. That's not great for Kilowattrel, but we do still have team members in the back. I switch to Belly Bolt. Their super effective Earth Power doesn't quite take half of our health. It does lower our defenses slightly, but we get an accuracy drop with Mud Slap. I really wanted to get another one off, but unfortunately a high roll on Earth Power knocks Belly Bolt out. I decided to send Kilowattrel in next, since he's not going to be much use for the rest of the fight, and I might as well try and do a bit of damage. We miss a Hurricane, and a rock-powered Terra Blast takes down Kilowattrel. I decide to send in Mismagius next, who's probably our best bet in the leftovers on our team. We go for a Psychic doing huge damage, and Mismagius holds on after a Terra Blast with just 2 HP. She goes for another Psychic, taking Glimora down to the orange, but unfortunately, one more Terra Blast is going to be more than enough to knock Mismagius out. This is getting really dangerous now since we really don't have any more team members other than Electrode. And the best part about this Pokemon is Explosion, which we now can't use because we'll lose the fight. I went for a super effective Gyro Ball, but it did basically no damage. I don't really see the point in that move. An Earth Power takes Electrode down to low health and I'm forced to use Discharge. I had no idea whether this would be effective. It was our only hope. Luckily, it paid off and knocked the Gamora out, winning us the champion battle and the champion title. We've got one more fight before we head down to Area 0 and it's going to be with Nomura. She starts with Lycanroc and gets a critical hit on Drill Run. This activates our static, getting the paralysis off. I started going for Mud Slaps to lower its accuracy and it got paralysed next turn, meaning we can get another Mud Slap. We actually did quite a few Mud Slaps and it just kept getting paralysed and kept missing, meaning that Belly Bolt was finally able to knock out the Lycanroc after about 5 minutes. She sends in her Orthworm next and does super effective damage, knocking Belly Bolt down to 15 HP. On top of that, I tried going for a Mud Slap but didn't realise that it had the Earth Eater ability, meaning it did no damage. This means that the Orthworm took out Belly Bolt next turn and we sent Luxray in. It did use super effective damage but did barely anything, and we finally managed to take the Orthworm down. Next up was the Dunsparce, who managed to take out Luxray, but we sent in Kilowattrel to finish it off. She then sent in Goodra, so we switched to Miss Magius so we could go for super effective Dazzling Gleams. Next up was Pawmot, so I just stayed in since Psychic type moves are going to be super effective against the Fighting type. We managed to take out Miss Magius, but only with a sliver of health left. I sent Kilowattrel back in and went for a Hurricane. This was kind of risky, but we managed to hit, and it paid off. All that she's got left is Quaquaval, and we have Electrode and Kilowattrel. I went for an Electro Ball, which was kind of stupid considering how fast Quaquaval is, but it did do huge damage anyway. It knocked out Quaquaval with an Ice Spinner, and Electrode was all we had left, but it was more than enough. One Discharge finished off the Quaquaval and finished off Nomura. This means there's only one more fight left to do, and it's at the bottom of Area 0. We knocked out the Slitherwing with Kilowattrel, and Kilowattrel got knocked out by Fluttermane. We sent in Electrode next, and a Discharge wasn't quite enough to finish it off, but it couldn't do much damage to us anyway. We finished it off with another Discharge, and she sent in her third Pokemon. This is a Brute Bonnet, so I switched to Miss Magius and took it out with Dazzling Gleam. She then sent in Screamtail, so I switched to Belly Bolt, and we got the static off, getting the paralysis. I then started going for accuracy drops, and eventually took it out with Chilling Water. Next up is probably her most dangerous Pokemon, including Roaring Moon, and she sends in Sandy Shocks. This Pokemon has ground type moves that are super effective, and it's got really good stats. I send in Luxray to try and deal with it, but an Earth Power takes him down to 61 HP. Luckily, Trailblaze is doing a decent amount of damage, but it survives with a tiny slither, finishing off Luxray with another Earth Power. That's not great, but there's not a whole lot we could have done about that. We just got unlucky. I sent Miss Magius back in, and things are not looking too great for us now. I go for a Dazzling Gleam, and we outspeed, knocking out the Sandy Shocks. She's only got one Pokemon left, but it is Roaring Moon, and it's very strong. We don't quite take it out with a Dazzling Gleam, as it survives with the Slither. Luckily, we've got our trusty Electrode, and with one Gyro Ball, we finish off the Roaring Moon and Sada. I actually really enjoyed using this team, and I wasn't expecting Electrode to be as fun as it was. If you want to see more challenges like this, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and if you got this far in the video, leave a like to support the channel. I'm going to be doing a run with Brassius' team next, so stay tuned for that one, and let me know if there's any other characters you want to see. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.